A Washington Post poll earlier this year found that 57% of Americans believe gender is based on the sex assigned at birth. Even a majority of millennials and young people agree. So why is the question, what is a woman, so impossible to answer? Well, Chris Christie is the former governor of New Jersey. He's also running for president, a Republican, and he joins me now. Well, Governor, you know the question. It's coming your way. What is a woman?
I have absolutely no idea, Piers. Let me tell you something. That was the biggest wind-up to that question I've ever seen in my life. Look, I have always looked at this traditionally, Piers. I'm a traditionalist. A woman is someone who is born with that biological gender at birth. I recognize now that there are folks who, feel differently about that. And they're free to feel differently about it. I don't. So to me, a woman is someone who's born a biological woman, and that's the definition. And I confronted the first edge of this when I was governor, because the legislature sent me a bill that would allow people to change their gender on their birth certificate. And I vetoed it.
But you have, notwithstanding that, you have been, I would argue, probably the most progressive of the Republican candidates this time around on this issue. You signed 2 bills that match California's bathroom policy for transgender youth and directed the New Jersey Department of Education to give schools guidance on other issues relating to transgender students, like preferred names and pronouns. Legislation also allowed transgender youth to participate in sports that match their gender identity rather than their biological sex.
That last part did not happen when I was governor. That happened when Phil Murphy was governor.
What is your view on that issue, though?
On transgender sports?
Should transgender athletes be allowed to compete against biological females?
Biological males should not be allowed to participate against biological females.
Done.
Done.
What about the issue of gender reaffirmment? This is a hot potato. This is where people want to know, if you were the President of the United States, how would you feel about kids from, say, 10 to 14? Even I was thinking you said that you think their parents should be involved. It shouldn't be an issue for states and so on. But is that really a sensible way to go, given all the abuse in this area that we've seen?
No, I think it is. We're having a big argument in our country, too, about parents being excluded from educational choices for their kids. And we, as a Republican Party and conservatives, say parents should decide their children's educational choices. Well, I don't think the government has any business getting in between a parent and their child in any one of these instances. I believe we should put parents in charge of these decisions when someone is not at the age of majority. And I always thought that that's what conservatives were all about. We wanted parents to be in charge.
But most conservatives are not about that anymore as a mindset.
Well, then they're not conservative.
Well, or maybe you're not a conservative by the modern yardstick.
No. That's like saying that now a biological woman isn't a woman by a modern yardstick. So don't use the modern yardstick one way and then want to change it a different way, okay? What is very clear to me is that conservatives don't want big government in their lives. They don't want big government interfering in their lives, especially in their personal lives. They don't want the government saying what books their children can read. They don't want the government saying, what their education should be. They want parents to be involved in the middle of that. Well, gee whiz. Shouldn't they be in the middle of making those decisions regarding their own kids?
But isn't it also a government's responsibility to protect children? And what we've seen in the last few years is a creeping erosion of kids' rights, where many of them are being frankly mutilated. And so a lot of people are looking to politicians now to take a lead and say, enough of this, enough of these clinics all around America. We've had them in the UK with the Tavistock Clinic and others, where, frankly, child abuse and mutilation has been going on. Is it not incumbent on politicians like you who want to be president to say, enough of this, we're going to protect our kids?
No, it's incumbent upon politicians to deal with other issues other than this. Let parents deal with these issues. My view of it is when we have war in Eastern Europe, when we have inflation that is bankrupting people in this country, when we have educational standards dropping through the basement, when we have a border that we can't protect, immigration system we can't fix. No, I don't believe that's what we should be doing. Let the government do the things they're supposed to be doing well first before they start substituting for a parent's judgment. Parents should decide where their kids go to school. We should have educational freedom. And parents should decide these issues, these very difficult sexual, emotional issues with their children. They shouldn't dish off that responsibility to the government.
You want to be president. To get there, you've got to win the Republican nomination.
That's what I've heard.
To do that, you've got to knock out Donald Trump.
Correct.
You've come out of the traps, flying and punching, and good credit to you, because somebody has to do that, otherwise they're not going to win the nomination from him. But it's a double-edged sword doing this because, of course, you run the risk of alienating the MAGA base that he has, which seems pretty rock solid, whatever mud is thrown at him. How are you going to get round that and get the nomination? How are you going to persuade those people who are full on for Donald Trump that you're not anti them too as you pound him into submission?
Well, because my comments are not about them, they're directly about him. And the fact is, I'm telling the truth. And the things that I've said, not even Donald Trump denies that they're true. I mean, let's just look at this as an example. What member of Donald Trump's senior staff or senior cabinet members would work for him again? Not one of his secretaries of state, not one of his secretaries of defense, neither of his attorneys general, not any of his chiefs of staff, not any of his White House counsel. What does that tell you about what it's like to work for this man? And what does that tell you?
You wanted to work for him?
No, I did not.
You wanted to be his attorney general?
No, excuse me. I got offered Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Homeland Security, White House Chief of Staff, and I turned them all down.
But you did support him.
Yes, I did.
Until you say January the 6th.
No, not January the 6th. Let me be very clear. People get this wrong. Election night 2020. When he stood up in the East Room of the White House behind the seal of the president and said the election was stolen, when not even all the votes had been counted, and he had no evidence, and to this day has no evidence that the election was stolen, that's when I abandoned him. And by the way, he abandoned me and others like me who supported him. I was the first one on board in 2016. I chaired his opioid commission. I chaired his transition. I prepped him for the debates in 16 and in 20. I did everything I could to support Donald Trump and make him the best president he could be. But he disappointed me and he let me down. He didn't repeal and replace Obamacare with a Republican Congress when he said he would. He added $6 trillion to the national debt. He didn't build the wall in Mexico. He built 47 miles of wall. And guess what? We paid for every nickel of it. We don't have the first peso from Mexico. And so when you look at the ways that he failed us, not even talking about his personal conduct, as a president, how he failed us, he abandoned me.
All right. Let's assume you're right about all that for a moment, hypothetically, right?
What did I just say that was wrong?
Not for me to say now. Well, here's my question. Okay, people watching this go, all right, if that's the case, why is he still so far ahead in the polling? Why are you so far behind? Why is your message, if you're right, getting so little traction?
Well, I've been in the campaign for 5 weeks, so how about you give me a little time? In 5 weeks, I've gone from nowhere.
How long do you need?
Well, for 5 weeks, I've gone from nowhere to third place in New Hampshire, only 4 points behind Ron DeSantis in 5 weeks. So I think I'm doing okay. And I'm going to continue to be patient and persistent. And you know me. I'm going to say it exactly the way I feel. I'm going to say it from the heart and from the gut. And you know what Republican voters deserve more than anything else? Two things. They deserve the truth, which they don't get from Donald Trump. And they deserve results on the issues they care about, like immigration and the national debt and educational freedom. And by the way, on educational freedom, he didn't do one thing to make it easier for people to get a good education.
What does this say about America? That we could end up, if you're unsuccessful in winning the nomination, in Donald Trump potentially under multiple indictments, potentially 4 different criminal situations that he's indicted over, possibly even getting convicted and being in a prison cell. And you've got Joe Biden, who many people think will barely last
past his sell-by date,
6 compos mentis months, let alone 6 more years. What does it say about the state of American politics?
Well, if that's where we end up, it's a sad state of American politics. To have 2 candidates combined at 160 years old to lead the strongest, freest, richest, most powerful country in the world. That's why I'm in this race, because I want to bring the truth to light to our voters on those issues. And they deserve the truth, they want the truth, and they deserve it. And he doesn't give it to them.
One thing you're definitely good at, you're good at ruffling feathers. You don't seem to care whether people like you necessarily. It's more about, for you, being transparent in what you believe. I remember when I interviewed you many years ago,
yes.
12 years ago, at another network, which we won't mention, which never really recovered from me leaving, to be honest. And you talked about your mother, who died a few years before, and you said your mother told you never to worry too much about being loved. Focus on being respected. Because if you're respected, you can find love down the road and people will love you for it, which I thought was a great quote. Do you still subscribe to that theory?
100%. 100% I still subscribe to that theory. I'm not going to pander to people. I'm not going to go to different audiences and give different messages depending upon who's sitting in those chairs. I'm going to continue to just be who I am. I don't know that that makes me a winner in this race, but guess what? At this time 8 years ago, Donald Trump was at 4%, and Jeb Bush was at 24%.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So we don't know what's going to happen here. In 2007, Barack Obama was 34 points behind Hillary Clinton at this point. So how about we have the campaign?
On one key issue, Donald Trump says he'll fix the Ukraine war in 24 hours.
Yeah, I know how he'll do it. He'll bend over like he always does to Vladimir Putin and hand him Ukraine. Because he thinks he's a terrific person and an honest guy. This guy who is an authoritarian dictator who has invaded a neighbor with artillery and killing innocent people and taking their land by force. This is the guy Donald Trump calls a terrific person.
Let me flip the argument back at you.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you broadly about Ukraine. But under Donald Trump's 4-year presidency, America never went to war anywhere. And none of these dictators, whether it was Putin, Kim Jong-un, any of them, pulled any stunts while he was president, as he keeps saying, but it's a fact. They didn't. Was there a bit of method to Trump's madness in the way he dealt with these people, and that people thought it was crazy, but actually maybe the unpredictability of Trump kept people like Putin and Kim Jong-un in their boxes?
Look, I don't think by calling Kim Jong-un a great guy, he stopped him from continuing to develop missile technology that now allows those missiles to reach the United States. That happened on Donald Trump's watch. And Putin continued to build up his military and build forces onto the border. And he doesn't answer for that either. And he doesn't answer for holding back military aid from Ukraine to try to get dirt on Joe Biden. I mean, all those things are not things that send confidence to world leaders or fear in the hearts of despots. But these are the things I want to debate on the stage with him, Piers.
Will he turn up?
I don't know whether he will, but you go to chrischristie.com today, donate $1. You'll make sure I'm on that stage, and I will confront him directly.
Governor, great to see you again after all these years. You've weathered well, I have to say.
I say you've weathered well yourself, young man. Looking good.
And just to clarify, you won't be identifying as a woman if you get to the president's, right?
Piers, I don't think there's anybody who looks less like a woman than me.
Governor, great to see you.
Good to see you, Piers.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.